What is the first thing that pops into your head when you first lay eyes on a watch? Well, with this Nodus sector field, for me, it was all about symmetry. Nodus for me is one of those micro brands that sits just above the mid-tier with a dip into the premium, if you can say that. And what that means is that you get mid-tier prices for premium quality. I just associated with the likes of Trasca, and I'm saying this because I also own a Trasca Summitier, and that's a whole $200 more expensive than the Nodus. And when you compare the finishing and the design, you practically get very similar levels. Now, Nodus is based in LA, and in the grand scheme of things, they're a relatively young microbrand, but I just think that their designs really put them in a very different category. I don't really know how to explain this, but it looks like every aspect of the watches has been very carefully researched, and it made sense for it to be where it is. That comes to my mind when I look at the dial of the sector field. Now, when I put this next to my Hamilton khaki field, the dial on the Nodus looks much more precise and much more better organized, and it looks like everything was designed in a lab by people with white coats, which, like, again, in the grand scheme of things, I think that's what people in labs do. They have white coats. And it's not just the dial, pretty much all the design elements are on the same theme. If you look at the case, you pretty much have an answer straight away on why certain elements are exactly where they are. Now, speaking of the case, when you look at the dimensions, you have pretty middle of the park numbers. A case diameter of 38 millimeters, a thickness of 12.5 with a flat sapphire crystal, a 47 millimeter lug to lug with a 20 millimeter lug width. And this, sized up for my magical wrist, weighs 138 grams. I feel that that pause was a lot longer than it was supposed to be. My magical wrist again. Now, what I like about this is that if you tell these numbers to someone first, or if I tell you these numbers first, you'd expect a smaller, more compact experience. But not really, because it carries itself very well and it feels like a 40 with a lot of confidence, whatever that means. Now, the weight really gives you that confidence when you wear it, and it's just so well put together. In terms of thickness, 12.5 millimeters for me starts to go into the thicker side of the wearing experience. And yes, I know I'm picky, but this just pulls it off, as contradictory as that sounds. Plus, the flat sapphire crystal is slightly raised, and you also have to remember that this is a 100-meter stated water resistant watch. So again, functional and precise elements that are there because they should be there to combine to a whole bigger picture. The same kind of theory applies in the case construction. So we have 306L stainless steel with a matte blasted finish running through the middle and on the top. And on the bottom of these, you have a highly polished bevel. Well, highly polished bevels, in plural. But wait, there's more. You have this two-step bezel, if I can call it that, which really adds a different visual flair. The surface of the bezel is highly polished, and immediately after that, you have the angled, slightly raised crystal. And the light just really gives it a bit more, or makes it come to life. I was gonna say gives it a bit more life, but the light gives it life. Yeah, that's a good wordplay. And I absolutely love the curved drilled lugs. It hugs the wrist nicely, and in case you're playing with straps, which you have easy access to, that being said, you have a quick release bracelet, but we'll get to that in a little while. If I was to put all these design elements into a category, it would be versatile, because I think the GADA term has been overused, and I need to try and keep things a bit fresher in terminology, a bit fresher. And yes, I almost forgot the signed screw down crown at the 3. This is just insanely good and easy to operate. The grip is beyond good, and I don't know if it's just me, but you never get the feeling that you might ruin the thread, because it always screws in from the first go. It always catches the thread beautifully. So that is perfectly machined. I feel that I actually didn't complain about anything so far, which is very unusual. But anyway, moving on to the dial. The color that I have here is called the Marina. There are two more variants, Redwood and Malibu. Very exotic names if you ask me. On the same note, I would go as far to say that these three colors should be enough to pretty much satisfy all tastes. You have the bold in the red, the color slash beach in the Malibu, and the plain Jane subdued blue in the Marina that I have here. The reason why I say this is because the dial combines different accents so well of that blue that nothing about it is boring. Now, when I look at this, am I overanalyzing? Of course I am, but I'm just telling you what I see. All the dial variants have this fume effect, lighter in the center, and it gets darker towards the outer edge. And on the same outer edge, you have the minute track printed on the chapter ring. The 12-hour numerals are 3D printed with Lume, and they have the same black outer edge that can only be seen under the macro lens, but it definitely offers some sort of separation there. If we move on towards the center of the dial, we have this dark blue disc that hosts the 24-hour numerals and offers more separation and has this sandwich effect, even though it's slightly raised. The text is kept to a minimum, just Nodus and sector at the sex and just below the pinion. And finally, we get to the hands, really long fence post style hands for the minute and the hour in white, and blue for the seconds hand. What I do like about the hands is that everything reaches, in this case, pretty much everywhere it should reach. The hour hands on the 24-hour markers, the minutes all the way out to the chaptering, and even the seconds hands almost touches the outer edge. Normally I don't care if the hands reach all the way out or they're too short, but once again I'm coming back to that whole super symmetrical elements, and everything blends in superbly. Another thing that I would like to add here is that the dial only uses two colors, blue and white, and it shows how much you can actually do with a bit of creativity if you play around a bit with the shades. Now, there is no date on this one, but they also have a version, but I much prefer this one that has a date. I love having the date function, but I think this looks much better without, and it keeps my symmetrical theme going. The last part that I want to cover here on the dial is the lume. So, according to the spec sheet, we have a TC1X1 Swiss Super Luminova. Now, I am no Lume expert, but this is supposed to be 30% brighter than regular C3. Now, my eyes, because I have two of them, cannot see the difference in color or notice a significant increase in brightness, or even comparing it to something very similar. But then again, it does the job much better than expected, but not like I was expecting it to be bad in any way. You should be able to tell the time during those pee trips at night in the dark. Now let's move on to the insides. Powering this, we have the Seiko NH38, which is basically the no-date version of the NH35. Specs should be on the screen. Now, according to Nodus, on the website fact sheet, they regulate the movement in the factory or before it reaches you as a customer to minus to plus 10 seconds per day in terms of tolerances. This particular one runs at minus 2 seconds per day, which is well within the movement stated tolerances, or the ones that they claim. I mean, $450 may or may not be a lot of money for anyone, but to get an NH38 for that kind of money and know that it has been regulated by the seller before getting to you, I believe is a great offering in the price category. I don't know of any brands that kind of do that within the price bracket. Now, lastly, supposed to move on, the bracelet. We have H-link style, same bead blasted finish with quick release spring bars. Tapers from 20 at the lugs to 18 where it meets the clasp. Screw pins to adjust, and very easy to do so, I might add. Milled upper and milled lower clasp, very solid and comfortable feel. We also have the top part of the clasp brushed so it doesn't get any scratches on the desk, because let's face it, you won't do any field work with this. And I'm not going to comment on the fact that it is missing the on-the-fly adjustment, because this, I believe, is an older release, so I'm not actually too fussed about that. Now, overall, the bracelet is pretty cool. It's amazing, but I have a couple of problems with it. The lugs from the bracelet don't actually follow the same lines on the case. Overall, we're well aware that you use the same bracelet, that other brands use the same bracelet on multiple case styles, but this one just looks slightly different. It looks like it's coming from a different watch altogether. It fits into the case pretty good, so there's no complaints there. But then again, it's just that the lines don't match. The lines of the case don't match the lines on the bracelet. And secondly, so much clasp and so very few holes to adjust. Now, why is that? None of these are specifically deal breakers for anyone, but it looks like the precision lab testing may have stopped at the bracelet, or maybe it was just a different lab altogether. What are my final conclusions? I personally think that Nodus are leading the $450 price category in terms of design and overall brand perception. What I mean by that is that they're perceived as having a solid, reputable name in the microband world, and you know what you're getting. You know you're getting a great, unique piece for not a lot of money. I personally love the subtle colors and the precise element that make this a Nodus, and I think that's why there is nothing that I can think of off the top of my head right now that competes with them on the level. Now, let me know in the comment section down below what you think about the sector, what you think about Nodus as a brand, and thank you very, very much for listening to me. Click a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't so, because this helps me get a lot more watches in, and it just fuels my ambition to do more videos, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye!